Jae stood in the middle of the dark, empty street. The cool night air pressed against him as streetlights flickered above, casting long shadows over the pavement. In the distance, the sound of approaching wheels grew louder. It was TJ racing toward the final stretch, unaware of what awaited him as he came around the final corner. TJ's face shifted from relief to disbelief. There, blocking the road, was the very person he least expected to see again tonight. Jae. With a fierce and unmoving presence, Jae wasn't there as a spectator. He had stepped into the race and into TJ's path, not for the team, not for pride, but for a personal reckoning. Forced to stop, TJ slammed on his brakes, the tires screeching against the road. His body tensed, jaw clenched with frustration. His anger wasn't just from being interrupted, it came from confusion. From the fear that he didn't quite understand why Jae was doing this. Jae stood silently for a moment, eyes fixed on TJ. There was no rage in his expression, only a deep resolve. He didn't need to scream or posture. His presence alone was enough to spark tension. Without saying much, Jae pointed to the long straight road ahead, the final stretch where the race would truly be decided. The gesture said everything: a challenge, a dare, a test of strength. And pride. TJ understood. He had no choice. He lined up next to Jae at the edge of the road. The two were opposites in every way. Jae on his old dented steel bike, and TJ on his sleek, carbon-framed machine designed for speed and prestige. The crowd watched from afar, breath held. The unofficial final showdown was about to begin. Then, they launched. TJ took the lead immediately. His bike responded like a feather in the wind, light and effortless. His body bent low, pushing to reach top speed. His mind screamed for victory, to prove that nothing, not even Jae, could overtake him. But behind him, Jae didn't flinch. Every rotation of the pedals was deliberate, every movement powerful. His steel frame groaned under the force. But Jae kept going. He didn't rely on technology. He relied on everything inside him: anger, humiliation, and a relentless desire to prove that even underdog trash could break past champions. Little by little, he closed the distance. TJ could hear the breathing behind him, feel the pressure building like a storm at his back. His confidence cracked. No matter how hard he pedaled, he couldn't shake Jae off. Panic crept in. At the finish line, MANHUA stood watching, still bruised, still aching, but standing. With eyes wide open, others gathered near him, confused and anxious. Was Jae really racing on their behalf? Then, from the shadows, two bikes surged into view, neck and neck, wheels spinning, legs burning, and then Jae pulled ahead. With raw determination and fearless momentum, he surged past TJ and crossed the finish line. Several meters in front, silence, then gasps. It was over. TJ slowed to a stop, chest heaving, his hands trembling on the handlebars. He had lost not just to Jae, but to everything he underestimated. The carbon bike didn't save him, his ego didn't carry him, and as he looked up, the sting of defeat wasn't from the loss itself. It was the words echoing in his head. Jae turned to him briefly, no mocking smile, no gloating, just a simple sentence, sharp as a blade: "It's not my bike that's trash, it's you." TJ lowered his head, unable to respond, but before anyone could speak, murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few voices raised a complaint. This was supposed to be a 2v3, someone said. Jae isn't part of the team, that's cheating. All eyes turned to MANHUA. He didn't argue. Instead, with quiet determination, he reached up to his arm, grabbed the Zephyrus badge, and tore it from his jersey. The sound of the fabric ripping was small, but it echoed louder than anything else that night. He dropped it to the ground and spoke. Not in anger, but with finality. "I already knew. I'm no longer part of this team." And with that, the night closed in, leaving everyone to think not about who won or lost, but about what truly defines a rider: the gear, the title, or the will to keep pedaling, even when no one believes in you. After the race ended and the crowd slowly dispersed, MANHUA stood in silence, the wind brushing against his bruised face. With steady hands, he removed the armband that bore the emblem of Team Zephyrus, the team he had built, nurtured, and protected all this time. He handed it over gently, and with a calm voice, asked the remaining members to take care of what he once led. "This team meant everything to me," he said, his voice quiet but heavy with emotion. "Please, don't let it fall apart." Then, he turned to June, his loyal companion, his friend through all of it. His gaze held a quiet apology. "I'm sorry for losing," MANHUA whispered. June didn't respond immediately. He just watched as MANHUA walked away, shoulders tense, his heart carrying a heavier loss than any defeat could bring. Not long after, Jae-jo returned Minu's helmet. Without much exchange of words, he simply handed it back and turned away, disappearing into the night like he had appeared with purpose. And mystery. The commentator, the biker woman who had been broadcasting the race, narrowed her eyes as she caught a glimpse of Jay's bike. Something about it felt familiar, as if the frame, the build, the feel of it belonged to someone she once knew. Her curiosity sparked, but she kept her thoughts to herself. Meanwhile, TJ, though technically the winner, stood in bitter silence. Victory never felt so hollow. The glory he'd imagined was drowned out by shame. He hadn't beaten Jay, he had merely outrun Manu, who was already broken, and the sting of Jay's words still echoed inside him. His fists clenched, his pride bruised. In that moment, the line between winner and loser blurred beyond recognition. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a figure emerged, a rare appearance from someone not usually seen. Vinny Hong, a student from Gunhai Junior School, calm and calculating. His eyes scanned the area with quiet intensity. It was no coincidence he arrived now. Some in the crowd whispered, wasn't he the reason Menyo's leg was injured during a previous race? But no one dared to ask him directly. He said nothing, just watched. Later that evening, Manu arrived home alone. The streets were quiet. His house stood cold and still, like a place no longer meant for him. As he entered, his father, just back from work, sat by the kitchen table. The tension was instant. What were you doing out there? His father asked sternly. Why aren't you studying like you're supposed to? Before Minu could answer, his mother gently tried to calm her husband, brushing her hand on his arm. He's still young, she said softly. He just wants to ride. It's just a phase. But when she stepped closer and saw the bruises on her son's face, she gasped. What happened to you? Look at your face. Minu stared back at her, not with gratitude, but with cold detachment. His voice cut through the air, sharp and bitter. Don't touch me. Keep your dirty hands off my face. The silence that followed was electric. His father's eyes flared with rage. Without hesitation, he slapped Minu across the face. A hard, loud crack that left the room frozen. That's how you speak to your mother, he bellowed. The fight escalated quickly. Words were thrown like knives, sharp, personal, unforgiving. Minu finally shouted what he had long buried inside, that the woman who stood as his mother wasn't his real mother, just someone who came into their lives chasing money, clinging to a man whose wallet got fatter over the years. His father, livid, grabbed Minyo's wallet, his last bit of independence, and hurled it at him. Get out, he growled. Get out of this house. Staggered, both emotionally and physically, Minu stepped back. The door shut behind him, with a finality that felt louder than the slap. Now out in the cold, he walked aimlessly through the quiet streets. Nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The pain in his leg throbbed, but the ache in his heart drowned it out. As he wandered, his mind drifted back to a time before all of this. Back when their family lived modestly, before the expensive cars, before the new house, before the strangers who called themselves family. He remembered simpler days, laughter around a small dinner table, biking down quiet lanes with no competition in sight, a father who smiled more, a home that felt real. And now, all of that, gone. The night had fallen, and the air was cold. Minu, now homeless after being thrown out by his father, wandered the streets with nowhere to go. His steps were slow and uncertain, his thoughts scattered. He had lost his place in the team, in his home, and seemingly in the world. His legs still hurt, his clothes were damp, and his pride was shattered. With no one to turn to, he simply sat under the soft light of a nearby convenience store. At that moment, Jae-jo appeared. He was buying a drink, his face as calm and distant as always. He saw Minu sitting outside and walked over casually. Without offering sympathy, he looked down at Minu and asked, with a dry tone, "Are you crying because you lost the race?" As usual, Minu responded with humor. Even in moments like this, he masked his pain with a light-hearted joke. He smiled, maybe to hide the sadness, maybe because that's all he could do. Trying to lighten the mood, Minu playfully asked Jae-jo if he could spend the night at his place. "I have been kicked out," he said with a grin. "I don't have anywhere else to go." But Jae-jo, being who he was, didn't offer an answer. He simply turned and began to walk away, showing the same indifference he always had. That's when Minu spoke again, more seriously this time. He stood up and explained, not in a joking tone, but honestly, that he truly had nowhere else to stay. He didn't have a single friend he could ask for help. He just needed a place to stay for one night. Just one. Jae-jo didn't respond with kindness. Instead, he said plainly, "I'm not a friend you can rely on." As Jay walked away, Minu stood silently under the dark sky, His thoughts drifted once again into memories. He remembered the past, how people used to surround him, laugh with him, want to be near him, but now he understood something painful. They had only stayed around him because he was rich. The moment he lost that, they disappeared. In truth, he had no one. While thinking, Manhwa noticed a small, wet shape moving through the rain. It was a stray cat. Soaked and shivering, the cat limped across the sidewalk. One of its legs was injured. Something in Manhwa shifted. He saw himself in that cat alone, hurting, and without shelter. Without thinking, he walked over and gently picked it up. Now drenched by the rain, holding the injured cat close, Manhwa wandered to a quiet neighborhood. He had nowhere to go, no plans, no backup. Eventually, he found himself in front of a familiar house. It was Jae-jo's home. He sat down on the steps, cradling the cat, his hair dripping wet, unsure if he was waiting for someone or simply out of options. Time passed slowly. Then, the door opened. It was Jae-jo, Jae's younger sister. She had just returned from her tutoring session and was surprised to see Manhwa sitting outside, soaked and holding a cat. She looked at him with kind eyes and without hesitation invited him inside. She didn't ask too many questions. She didn't seem to care that he was wet or that he didn't belong there. She simply saw someone in need and opened the door. Meanwhile, Jae-jo, who had left earlier, started to feel uneasy. Something about Manhwa's situation stayed in his mind. Even though he pretended not to care, something in him did. He walked back toward his house, holding an umbrella, maybe to offer it to Manhwa. But when he reached the house, he was shocked. There, right at the front door, stood Manhwa, already inside with K. Jae-jo froze for a moment. Surprised. Manhwa, realizing how it might look, apologized right away. "Sorry for coming in without asking," he said quickly. But before Jae could say anything more, he noticed that Manhwa was still drenched from the rain. He didn't argue. Instead, he simply told him to go take a shower. Without another word, Manhwa nodded and went to clean himself up. For a moment, the house was quiet. Later, hunger kicked in. After drying off, Manhwa walked over to the kitchen and opened Jae-jo's refrigerator, hoping to find something to eat. But before he could take anything, the front door opened. It was Jae-jo's mother. She walked into the house, only to find a complete stranger, soaked, injured, and standing in front of her open fridge. The moment their eyes met, both of them were stunned. The atmosphere inside Jae-jo's house shifted quickly when his mother returned and saw a stranger standing in her kitchen. But her surprise softened the moment she recognized who he was. "You're the son of the director, aren't you?" she asked politely. Manhwa nodded. That changed everything. Suddenly, her tone became more composed and she politely invited Manhwa to join them for dinner. It seemed like she wasn't only being hospitable, there was something careful, almost calculated, in the way she acted. Maybe it was because Manhwa was the son of someone important. Maybe it was her way of protecting her family's image. Either way, she welcomed him. They sat around the dinner table, the air warm and filled with light conversation. Although the discussion felt pleasant, it was clear that Jae-jo's mother was measuring every word she said. She smiled and listened, but her eyes remained sharp. Beneath her calm surface, Jae-jo's mother was a strict parent. Education was her top priority, and she always expected her children to follow the rules and maintain high standards. As they ate, her gaze focused on the small bruises and scratches on both Jae-jo and Manhwa. She frowned slightly and asked what had happened. Manhwa, trying not to cause trouble, quickly answered, "We got into a small argument with a few people, but it's nothing serious." He carefully avoided mentioning anything about bike racing. Still, Jae-jo's mother wasn't pleased. Her eyes turned to Jae with visible disappointment. "Have you been fighting again?" she asked firmly. Then came another hit: his grades. She mentioned that she had seen a drop in Jae-jo's academic performance lately. "You know what will happen if your grades keep falling," she reminded him coldly. "You'll be banned from anything related to bikes." The room fell silent for a moment. It was a harsh warning, but one Jae-jo had heard before. Later that night, in Jae-jo's bedroom, the tension turned into awkward comfort. Manhwa walked around the room freely and then jumped onto the bed. With a loud sigh, he announced, "I can't sleep unless it's a bed." Jae-jo stood still for a second, clearly annoyed. But rather than arguing, he gave up and pulled a blanket from the closet, laying it down on the floor. "I'll sleep here," he said quietly, his voice full of frustration. Before Jae could turn away, Manhwa added casually, "I'll be staying here for a few days." By the way, Jae-jo didn't say anything, but the annoyed look on his face said it all. As the night settled in and the lights dimmed, the two of them lay in the room together. The rain outside had stopped, and everything was quiet. Manhwa, breaking the silence, asked, "Since when did you start liking bikes?" Jae-jo answered, Since I was a kid, I used to see a boy who looked so happy while riding. I watched him a few times, and I guess I slowly started falling in love with biking. There was something calm and real in his voice. That moment revealed a piece of Jejo that he rarely showed to anyone. Minu smiled. Why don't we make our own team? But Jejo didn't hesitate. No. His answer was short and final. The next morning, Minu woke up to the delicious smell of food. He followed the scent to the kitchen, and when he saw what was happening, he burst out laughing. There was Jejo, wearing an apron and cooking. You look like you're cosplaying, Minu teased, grabbing his phone and snapping a few pictures of Jay without asking. Jejo ignored the teasing and continued cooking. Once the meal was done, Minu expected the plate to land in front of him, but instead, Jejo picked it up and walked straight outside. Wait, what? Isn't that for me? You shouted. No, Jay replied flatly. It's for the cat. Minu was furious. What? Then what am I supposed to eat? Without looking back, Jejo told him, make your own. Outside, Keijo, who had just woken up, saw what was happening and immediately scolded Jay. You can't feed human food to cats. Jejo stared at the plate and then, without a word, sat down and started eating it himself. Back in the city, somewhere else, the school principal was on the phone. On the other end of the call was his granddaughter, Shelly. She had just arrived in Korea, and there was something special about her. It seemed Shelly also had a deep passion for biking. Early in the morning, the sound of tools clinking echoed softly in a quiet corner as Mingyu knelt beside his bicycle. His hands, smudged with grease, moved quickly and precisely. The bike wasn't in perfect shape, still suffering from issues with its brakes, but Minu wasn't discouraged. He was determined to fix it, just like he was determined to keep riding no matter what. While he worked, someone approached from the side of the road. It was Yuna, his younger sister, or rather, his twin. The resemblance between them was striking, but their personalities often clashed. Still, there was something unspoken that kept them connected. Yuna held out a small bag toward him. Here, she said, her voice matter of fact. This is the shirt you ordered last night. Without looking up from his bike, Minu took the bag. Thanks, he mumbled. Yuna lingered a moment longer. Want to head to school together? It was a simple offer, but Minu shook his head. Nah, I'm riding. There was no room for negotiation in his tone. Yuna didn't push it. She understood that when Minu had his mind set on something, it was better not to argue. With a small shrug, she turned and left. Soon after, as the sun climbed higher and the morning brightened, Minu spotted Jejo. Hey, let's ride to school. Together, Minu said with a grin. Jejo looked at him blankly. I don't have bus fare today, Minu added casually, hopping on his half-fixed bike. Without another word, the two of them began riding. As they pedaled side by side, Minu suggested taking a detour through the park. He said it was because his brakes were still a bit shaky, but the truth was that he just wanted to enjoy the morning more. The park was quiet, the air fresh, and the trees lined the path like tall, silent spectators. It was the perfect day for riding. Minu, feeling the wind in his face and the rhythm of the road beneath his tires, turned to Jejo again. Want a race? Jejo, unsurprisingly, gave a flat no. That didn't stop Minu from smiling anyway. Elsewhere, at school, things were already in motion. In the hallway, Mia and Yuna were chatting again. Their conversations often drifted toward the same topic. Jejo, Yuna, never one to hold back, was once again urging Mia to stop hiding her feelings and be honest with herself and with him. Just tell him how you feel, Yuna said, nudging her friend lightly. Mia blushed but stayed quiet, staring at the floor. As usual, their moment was broken by Dom, who popped up out of nowhere, cracking jokes and teasing Yuna just enough to get her annoyed. Back outside, Mia noticed something odd. There they were, Joe and Minor, arriving at school side by side on their bicycles. It wasn't just the fact that they were together, it was the energy between them. Something had shifted, and Mia could feel it. Later in class, Minu did something that surprised everyone. He wheeled his bike directly into the classroom, as if it were a normal thing to do. His confidence was undeniable. Some students laughed, others stared. Hey, how much is that bike? Someone finally asked. Joking. You answered calmly, but when the number came out of his mouth, the room fell silent. Everyone's eyes widened. They had expected a high number, but not that high. At lunch, Yuna approached Jejo again. She had an idea for the next student council meeting. Let's do it at a coffee shop tomorrow, she said brightly, not really waiting for him to agree to that. Giving him time to respond, Yuna turned around and walked away, like it had already been decided. Before she left, she leaned over to Mia and whispered something. make sure you dress cute tomorrow. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a push. And as the day went on, it was clear that things weren't staying the same. The team was changing, relationships were shifting, and somewhere behind all the laughter and teasing and awkward conversations, the wheels of something bigger were already turning.